Welcome back to Odds of War. I'm Matt, and today we're talking about whether or not you should make the jump from Kill Team to 40k. Stay tuned. So today we're going to kind of explore the pros and the cons of Kill Team and 40k, their differences and stuff like that, which there's both good things and bad things. If you're like me, you've got a good collection, so you can play either whenever you want, or perhaps you started out with Kill Team and you've been growing your force and you're wondering whether or not you should make the leap into Warhammer 40k with 9th edition. So we're going to kind of explore that today. So to start off, I want to just go over some of the wide overarching things that's different in 40k compared to Kill Team. Chief amongst those is that Kill Team is a game played with individual models, whereas Warhammer 40k is a game played with units. Now, some of those units may only be a single model, but many of those units are going to be multi-model units. So depending on which Kill Team you've been collecting, you may find that your entire Kill Team is actually only one unit in a game of Warhammer 40k. That may sound daunting as far as the scale of 40k goes, but depending on how you've been collecting your force for Kill Team, it's actually quite likely that if you've gone into the Commander's expansion, if you've gone into the Elite expansion, and if you've collected all the different options from the core manual, and you've collected all these different options for your force, you actually are probably quite close to a combat patrol game size in full 40k, if not maybe even a larger game, depending on the faction you're collecting. Depending on what you've been collecting, it may or may not be right for you to make the jump with that force. A big pro for going into the world of 40k is that you have a much wider selection of available units. There are whole units like vehicles and planes and even certain elite and heavy support and fast attack selections in 40k that just aren't available in Kill Team. So if you found yourself perhaps finding Kill Team growing stale with the availability of models, you might want to look at 40k as really broadening your horizon, not just in the availability of units to play, but just in the units available to collect and model and paint, as of course this is a huge hobby, a whole inclusive hobby, not just for playing the game, but for also painting and modeling. Kill Team, of course, we know plays as standard on a 30-inch by 22-inch board. And now the smallest size of the 40k games is 2 of those Kill Team boards pushed together. So once again, you may find yourself that you would need to invest in another board or perhaps even a table to fit a game of 40k. But if you've collected Kill Team to a large degree and you've collected yourself 2 Kill Team boards already, you might be ready to go right into combat patrol with that. Now, the last overarching thing that I want to say about Kill Team and 40k that's like a pretty big departure is the way command points work. So for example, in Kill Team, you start off with 1 command point per round and then an additional command point per round if your leader is on the table and not shaken. Whereas in 40k, depending on your army structure and your game size, you start off with a static amount of command points. For combat patrol, which is the most likely thing that you'll be going into from Kill Team if you choose to make the jump, you'll start off with 3 command points, and then you'll gain 1 command point per round, regardless of what units are on the board or not. So it's a subtly different command point system there. You may find that you like one more than the other, and that may be a determining factor for you. So now we're going to sort of go through the game structure of the 2 games and sort of do a comparison and contrasting of them and, just kind of explore them. This is not going to be a comprehensive look at the 40k rule set. This is going to be coming from a place of your roughly familiar with the Kill Team rule set, you may find that you have questions. I may gloss over certain things, assuming that you might know them. So feel free to let me know down in the comments any questions you have, any further clarifications you need. I'm happy to answer those for you. And before we get into this part, if you like these sorts of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know down in the comments what you like and don't like. And if you're interested in supporting the channel in a myriad of ways, we've got a bunch of different stuff all down in the description below for you to explore. Chief amongst those, we have our Patreon, where we have a really cool narrative battle report series going on right now called The Thawed Rose Repentant. You can get all the details down in the comments below. All right, one more thing too about the Kill Team in 40K. Now, a game of Combat Patrol in 40K takes just about as long as a game of Kill Team does, but the larger scale of 40K, the larger games obviously take much more time than a Kill Team game does. And depending on what size of the game of 40K you're playing, there can be a significant lag in sort of action for you. The biggest difference between Kill Team and 40K is that Kill Team has much more alternating activations than 40K does. So depending on your initiative, so to speak, in 40K, you may find yourself sitting around for quite some time waiting for your opponent to play. So speaking of that, let's get into the turn structure of 40K and Kill Team and talk about the big differences. A couple things are going to be mostly the same. The sequencing of attack rolls and like hit rolls, wound rolls, saving throw, damage done, that's all the same. Most of your movement abilities, things like, that you measure from base to base, those sorts of things are going to be the same. Now, like I said, there's going to be certain things I gloss over here because this is not a comprehensive rules breakdown. Mission choice is going to be largely the same as Kill Team. There are bespoke missions with static objective placement and static deployment zones. So that's going to be largely the same from Kill Team and 40K. You're going to pick your mission. You're going to collect your forces. You're going to talk about that. You'll talk about any special abilities that you have, that sort of thing. 40K has things called warlord traits and relics that Kill Team does not. So you'll discuss that sort of thing there. Once you've got yourselves all set up, you're going to deploy. And now deployment, again, is going to be mostly the same from Kill Team to 40K. You're going to alternate deployment starting with a player, and whereas Kill Team, you put one model, 40K, you put one unit. Then you alternate placing units until everyone's deployed. There's some subtle differences as to like when you put something in reserves compared between the two, but for ease of math, we'll say it's mostly the same. You alternate deployment until someone is done deploying. Now in Kill Team, you would go into the initiative phase where in each round of the game, you'll roll off to see who has initiative. In 40K, this is done once, and it's at the start of the battle after you've deployed. You'll roll off, and the winner gets to decide who goes first and who goes second. That will remain true for the entirety of the game. So you won't, in round 2, round 3, round 4, you won't re-roll for that initiative. You'll just maintain. Now, this is what I was saying about you may find yourself waiting around for quite some time, because if your opponent wins that roll-off, decides that they want to go first, and they have a large model count army to move and shoot and everything like that, you may find yourself waiting a long time for them to finish their turn before you even move a single model. But we'll get to that more as we go. In 40K, you start off the round, instead of with the initiative phase, you start off with the command phase, which is where you'll generate your 1 command point per round, and then any abilities that are resolved in the command phase will happen here. You go on to movement phase. Now, movement phase is largely the same from Kill Team to 40K. You move your units, measuring in inches. You have to account for terrain. Now, certain terrain you can move through in 40K, whereas in Kill Team you can't move through any terrain. But it is largely the same of if you want to go from the bottom floor to the second floor of a ruin, you have to spend the movement to climb up it. You have to spend the movement to go around things, that sort of stuff. Much like Kill Team has the vaulting. If a piece of terrain is less than an inch and a half high and an inch and a half wide, you can just go over it with no movement penalty. 40K has a very similar thing in that if a terrain piece is an inch or less tall, you can just move over it with no spending of movement to climb up it. Here's where your major differences come in. First of all, in 40K, there's no alternating movement. So in Kill Team, as you know, you move all of your pieces, all of your models, and then your opponent moves all of their models. In 40K, only the player who is currently active moves their models. So they move, and then they will finish all their movements, and then they'll go right into psychic phase without you getting to move. Okay, so this is very, very important, and we'll talk more about why in a bit. Another big difference is that the charge movement is taken out of the movement phase and is in a later phase of the game. So in Kill Team, you can move, advance, stay stationary, that sort of stuff, or you can charge. In 40K, you get to move, and then later in the turn, you get to charge as well. So it really increases the threat range of those units that want to charge, and in fact can even open up units that you normally wouldn't charge with into charging, because you can move, shoot, and then charge. Another big change in the movement phase from Kill Team to 40K is there's no such thing as readying. Now we'll discuss this more in the shooting phase, but in the shooting phase, you also don't alternate activations. So there's no need to ready, as the player who is active will get to shoot all of their models before. So there's no readying. So your only real options are a normal move, an advance, remaining stationary, or falling back. Fly is largely the same, except that it doesn't do as much in 40K as it does for you in Kill Team now. Right now, falling back in 40K is a bit different than in Kill Team, because you can do certain things like trapping units by surrounding them that you just can't really do in Kill Team because of the difference in model count. And there are different stratagems that you can use in 40K to affect the ability to fall back or the inability to fall back, or perhaps cause damage on the fallback. If you are feeling hesitant about making the jump, really look at the movement phase and decide if the differences there are amenable to you, and that might be your deciding factor right there. The last big difference that we're going to talk about for the movement phase is reinforcements. Now in Kill Team, you can place, since the Elites expansion, you can place up to half of your models in reserves, and then they can come on the board in different ways. In 40K, there are still those faction-specific abilities to put things in reserves, but there's also a overarching game-wide strategic reserves system that costs CP to come in. These sorts of things do make small, subtle differences in how you'll treat reserves. And again, remember, all of this is filtered through it's not just single models that you're putting in reserves, it's whole units. So anywhere from 5 to 10 to, even in the case of something like Orc Boys or Tyranid Hormagaunts, units of 30. All right, and then now we move on into the Psychic phase. So the Psychic phase is thankfully largely the same from Kill Team to 40K. Some units are designated Psychers, and they have psychic abilities, and they can cast those psychic abilities. The rules for casting are the same. The roll 2d6, and that's your warp charge value. The rules for Deny the Witch are the same. Roll 2d6, and if you beat the warp charge value of your opponent, you deny their power. Perils of the Warp is effectively the same. If you roll a double 1 or double 6, your Psyker immediately suffers D3 mortal wounds. If the Psyker unit is destroyed, the power is failed. If the Psyker unit is destroyed, instead of in Kill Team, it's every model within 3 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds. In 40K, it's every unit within 6 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds. So you can see it's a little bit bigger. It's a little worse. In 40K, you don't have Psybolt. Instead, you have Smite, which is, instead of 1 mortal wound, D3 mortal wounds. And if you roll an 11+, instead of D3, it's D6 mortal wounds. So You can see, again, Smite's a little more powerful than Cybolt, but that makes sense because instead of doing a mortal wound to a single model, you're doing D3 mortal wounds to a unit that consists of multiple models. Now, the only other real big difference between the two psychic phases is that many more factions have access to psychic powers in 40k than they do in Kill Team, and the variety of those psychic powers is much greater. All right, so now we're going to move on into the shooting phase. And again, guys, remember, I've said it before, I'll say it again here. This is not meant to be a comprehensive guide of the 9th edition rule set, only more of an overview and discussion of some of the big differences between Kill Team and full 40k. If you guys are interested in a good in-depth discussion of the 9th edition rules and going through them, we can definitely make that. Just let us know down in the comments below if you want that sort of thing. Talking about the shooting phase, once again, one of our biggest differences is that there is no alternating activations. In 40k, there is no such thing as readied, and it's only the player who activates or who is active that shoots. This is where I was saying earlier on in deployment that deployment is so much more important in 40k than it is in Kill Team, because if you have second turn, you're not going to get to move any of your models before your opponent gets to shoot at your models. Now, in Kill Team, you can be pretty aggressive with your deployment because you know that you can move your models either out of line of sight or into obscurement from your opponent before they get to shoot. Whereas in 40k, once you've placed down your models, they may just be there until your opponent gets to shoot. And so if you play very aggressively and put them out in the open, they're just going to be out in the open for your opponent. Now, another large factor in Kill Team, you can have a -1 for being a -1 to hit for being at long range. You can have a -1 to hit for your target being obscured. You can have a -1 to hit for having a flesh wound, that sort of stuff. In 40k, the modifiers are capped at a +1 or -1. So your importance, I would say, of getting multiple minuses to hit in Kill Team is very important because you can just completely negate someone shooting. In 40k, that's just not the case. You can negate someone's +1 to hit, but you can never get them to be hitting on 6s if they're like ballistic skill 3 up, for example. Another big effect in Kill Team, terrain, right, just either blocks line of sight or obscures. In 40k, terrain is much more impactful to the game as far as other effects. There are a myriad of effects that it gives beyond just having a -1 to hit or blocking line of sight. It can do things like actually affect your saving throws, like giving you a +1 to your save. All right, another big change from Kill Team to 40k. In Kill Team, if you are outside of half range of your weapon, you are considered to be at long range and suffer a -1 to hit. In 40k, that's just not a thing. There's no such thing as short range or long range. You simply are in range of your weapon or are not. Now, there are still things like the different weapon types, rapid fire, assault, stuff like that. And so for like rapid fire weapons, you'll still need to account for where you are in the range of the rapid fire weapons. But you won't receive a -1 to hit if you are outside of half range with your rapid fire weapon. Speaking of weapons, they are largely the same. Rapid fire does what it does. Assault, same thing. Pistol, grenade, heavy, all of that's the same. Heavy is slightly different though, whereas again, this is a unit and model situation. In Kill Team, it's if the model moves that has the heavy weapon, they suffer a penalty. But in 40k, if the unit that has a model with a heavy weapon moves, they suffer the penalty for moving with a heavy weapon. And then we'll talk about one last thing here in the shooting phase before we move on. Like I alluded to previously, the sequence of roll to hit, roll to wound, roll to save, roll damage if applicable is all the same. You follow that same sequence in 40k as you do in Kill Team. A big difference here is that assuming that damage was afflicted, you don't make an injury roll. Okay, there are no injury rolls in 40K. You just lose the models. Now we're on to the charge phase. Now in Kill Team, there is no charge phase. Charging is taken care of during the movement phase, but in 40K, charging is its own complete phase. Charging works mostly the same. You see if you're within 12 inches of a opponent's unit, and if you want to charge, you declare a charge. They get an opportunity to react. Now, in their reactions, there is no retreat in 40K. There is only Overwatch. So they get to choose if they want to Overwatch. And now Overwatch is not a free thing in 40K. It used to be, but is not anymore. It costs a CP to Overwatch. But again, you don't Overwatch with a single model. You Overwatch with an entire unit of models into an entire unit of models. You roll the 2d6 just like you do in Kill Team, and then assuming that you successfully roll high enough to make the charge, you move your unit in. Now, a couple differences in Kill Team: you can declare any number of models within 12 inches, and as long as you can make it to one of them, you successfully charge. In 40K, however many units you declare, you have to make it to all of them. So charges are a little riskier in 40K than they are in Kill Team. The sequence, once you've made your charge, assuming you have made your charge, the sequence of pile in, choose targets, select your weapon that you're going to fight with, make your melee attacks, all of that, and then consolidate. All of that follows the same. When you make your pile-ins and consolidates, you have to keep what's known as unit coherency. And actually, I probably should have mentioned that back in the movement phase, because you're talking about a game that is units, not models. In Kill Team, there is no unit coherency, right? You can just move every model wherever they want to go. Whereas in 40K, models have to stay within 2 inches of other models in their unit. We've said this before, we're going to say it again, there's no alternating activations in this phase. So you charge, but your opponent doesn't charge, or your opponent charges, but you don't charge. So again, this harkens back to, once again, the importance of deployment in 40K. Deployment is so much more important in 40K because once you've deployed, you might get second turn, and then your opponent gets to move, your opponent gets to shoot you, charge you, and fight you, all before you get to do anything with your models. And you may, if you've been too aggressive, for example, and get caught out, you may just have to suffer an entire turn of just watching your units and models get removed from the table before you can even act. We're going to move into the fight phase. So the fight phase is largely the same. In 40K, charging units get to fight first. And then this is where we see a return to the alternating activations. So the players alternate activating units to fight, starting with charging models. Then we go into the morale phase. Now the morale phase is again one of these phases of the game that is massively different from Kill Team to 40K. Now in Kill Team, the morale phase, you're checking to see if your kill team is broken. Then you're removing shaken tokens, and then you're taking any nerve tests if applicable. In 40K, there is no such thing as becoming broken, so there's no break test. And there's no such thing as becoming shaken, so there's no shaken tokens to remove, and there's no nerve checks to take. Okay, so we're talking completely different morale here. For 40K, morale is you take the amount of models that have been lost from a unit and you roll a d6, kind of like a nerve test. And if that, you add those together, if that total exceeds the leadership of the unit, they have to take what's called combat attrition tests, and they may just have whole models removed from the board. So that's your big difference there. Morale in Kill Team, you may become shaken and your model can't do anything, but still exists on the board. Whereas in 40K, if you fail a morale test, you just end up getting whole models removed from the game. And then lastly, you have your unit coherency checks after the morale phase, which again is not a thing in Kill Team, but unit coherency, like I alluded to before, you have to keep your models within 2 inches of other friendly models of the unit. If you find that they do not meet the coherency guidelines, you have to remove them from the table again, so you can just lose models wholesale there. Once you've moved through everything in that one turn structure, it goes to the opposite player. Then they get to move and shoot and psychic and fight and all that stuff. And then you conclude the battle round. So you can see how in a small points game, in a combat patrol game of 40K, when you're only maybe having like 5 to 6 units, it's not that much longer than Kill Team. But when you're playing what's called like a Strike Force game, which is 2,000 points, that can take a good bit more time. So guys, the last thing we're going to sort of talk about is whether or not making the jump from Kill Team to 40K is right for you. The difference in the rule set could definitely be a deciding factor. If learning a new rule set, because it's not a straight one-to-one port over. You're not going to just go, well, I know how to play Kill Team, so I know how to play 40K. It's a different game. It has different strategies. It has different values put on things like high strength weapons versus, you know, massed low strength weapons, combat shooting, all that stuff. It's different. So it's a different game. It's a different meta, if you will. So if learning that doesn't sound appealing, if relearning the game, stick to Kill Team. If relearning the game, learning a new game sounds like an exciting, fun challenge for you and your play group, by all means, get into 40K. If the variety of 40K in modeling and hobbying and different units sounds great, man, go for it. There's a wealth of models that are available for 40K that aren't in Kill Team. But if that sounds maybe a little too much right now, maybe just don't go to it. And like I said earlier, if you have really collected and fleshed out a Kill Team, you might actually be closer to a combat patrol game of 40K than you might think. You might only need purchasing 1 or maximum 2 more units, depending on what you have in your collection already. And of course, if you're like me, you've already been playing 40K and Kill Team simultaneously, hand in hand. I mean, great, go for it. It's a no better time than a new edition to dig into relearning an army and stuff like that. So that's it, guys. That's going to be all for this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you're interested in seeing something more in-depth discovery and talk about Warhammer 40K 9th edition, let us know down in the comments. And we're actually going to, I've been teasing this narrative campaign for a while now, since the beginning of the year, but of course, our COVID situation in the world has sort of really put a stymie on that. But with 9th edition, they've come out with the Crusade system. So I'm going to be looking at combining the Kill Team campaign system and the Warhammer 40K 9th edition Crusade system to really create this awesome narrative campaign thing with the different guys who've been on the channel to present to you. So we'll hope you enjoy that. If you want to see these videos in your feed every week, make sure to hit the subscribe button below. Increasing the subscriber count really does increase our reach and helps more people see our videos. So please make sure to do that. Hit the thumbs up button. Talk to us down in the comments. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, there's a bunch of ways to do so in the description. Chief amongst those, we have a Patreon that we've got a really cool narrative campaign going on over there, actually, of which at time of filming 2 videos are live right now, ready for you to watch. So thank you so much for checking out this video, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.